Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Today we have with us Chris Shockowitz, author of the science fiction novel Silent Invasion, the first book in the Zalthuras Series. The audiobook was narrated by Becky Parker, that's me, and is available at your favorite audiobook retailer. We also have with us a longtime friend and co-worker of Chris's during his many years at Intel, Rajeev Nanda, author of AI.gov. Rajeev is going to lead off our discussion today, asking Chris about trends in science fiction, Asimov versus Clarke, and where Chris sees himself as an author. And what about this trend of adding fantasy to sci-fi? Should that stand on its own? Should sci-fi go back to basics?
Any opinions or any thoughts on the trend? Should science fiction be, go back to its roots or back to basics? Or, do you think that a merger of or a combination of fantasy and science fiction is something that is the next genre of, sci-fi?
Yeah, so what's been really neat is that the whole explosion of tools for people to self-publish has really caused, anybody to be able to publish, which is great. And I think science fiction's evolving just like we evolve as a species, right? Everything evolves over time. I really do like, I'm obviously influenced by like Clarke and Hyland and Dan Simons and those guys. But I really like that style of science fiction. Personally, when the fantasy gets mixed in, I think there's some very interesting stories that are out there. And I think as we go through time, we're probably going to explore and find more and more interesting things. But what happens with the older science fiction is a lot of it is about the technology and how the technology blends in. As technology evolves, really, if technology becomes better, the better technology is, the less it's there, right?
Yeah.
So us in this whole conversation with some of us as headsets on and microphones and stuff, that's just going to just disappear. And I really expect, for example, glasses to become the new interface, where you get to put on your glasses. For us who have glasses, that'll be your interface. You'll be able to blink and basically bring up a menu and do anything you want to do, like you do on your computer or your cell phone.
Like the Minority Report on steroids, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
yeah.
And in addition to that, like in my next book, which is the follow-on to Silent Invasion, putting a hand out on it. So my next book that's following to Silent Invasion, actually, it's about 10 years in the future, and everyone on the space station basically uses glasses as their interface to the station.
So you mentioned that you were influenced a lot by Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, and all that. So when I read both of your books, the Silent Invasion and the Colonizing Trappist, I observed that your style is more Arthur C. Clarke than Asimov. So within, let's say, the masters of Arthur C. Clarke, Frank Herbert, and Heinlein and all. So were you more influenced by Arthur C. Clarke, or did your just writing style evolve to be that?
It definitely evolved. At first, I want to say thank you, because Clarke is the better writer than Asimov, but just in terms of skill. But
you'll start a mutiny on that, right?
But yeah, I think Clarke essentially had these very interesting situations evolve and would play them out. One of the things, like with Rendezvous with Rama, I really hated the ending of that because there was nothing satisfying at the end of it. But I like that kind of concept where there's something big going on and it doesn't go the way you expected, and then it's kind of unfolding and you're exploring and learning all these new things. That's what I love to write.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I noticed that at least in Silent Invasion, that the story starts unfolding. It reminded me a lot of how Arthur C. Clarke would write his novels. Yeah,
I actually didn't do that on purpose. I was actually trying with Silent Invasion to do a little more like Clive Cussler.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess it came out like Clarke.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So, you mentioned, that in the next book, you are using some of these evolving technologies like the, glasses becoming a primary interface to technology.
Right.
But, recently, if you talk about artificial intelligence, blockchain, some of these virtual reality. So are you looking at, integrating those themes also in your books, or that's something that you think is a future that has passed already?
Well, yeah. I mean, like I was saying before, as the technology gets better, it gets more invisible. And I think AI is going to it's going to be one of the things that helps make technology more invisible, because you won't have to play with things because it'll do it for you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do actually in Colonizing Trappist, which is a little further out in time, there is actually an AI, and the people interact with the computer, kind of like Star Trek, but not quite. Star Trek, it's really interesting that you have to have somebody ask the computer something when, well, you're the captain. Why don't you just ask the computer? Why do you have the other person ask the computer? It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
In the next book, which is called Earth 0 Hour, about halfway through it, it does actually get into AI, and I get into this very interesting artificial intelligence for these kind of drones. So Intel does those drones. Remember where they did the big light shows, and it's 1,000 drones?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
think about a station space where you're putting out 500,000 drones, and their job is to spin around the station really fast and to block incoming shots.
Yeah. Wow.
So you can block 500,000 shots with 500,000 drones, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting, better than point defense type of thing. That is all basically controlled through an artificial intelligence, because you'd have to for the complexity of it all, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the response time, and that obviously you cannot keep on clicking the buttons, right?
Exactly.
Or driving through yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I didn't go the way that you did with your book, AI.gov, where it's kind of about, what's the implications of it to society. So I was kind of more, what's the results of using it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because, essentially when I wrote that short story, it was more of, the immediate effect of AI taking over a government and how that would impact, our lives. But
yeah, the potential for good and evil.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You can trust the politicians, right?
Yeah.
And if the AI becomes a politician, then you know what.
Right.
Yeah. So, what about Silent Invasion? When is the second book? Is it already out, or are you done?
Yeah, so Earth 0 Hour. So basically in Silent Invasion, that dream that I started off thinking of as a video game, and then I kind of changed it to a book, which is, if aliens invaded Earth, why would they ever risk themselves when we're so willing to kill each other? All they have to do is influence us to kill each other, and they can do, they can completely manipulate us, right? Yeah. So that was kind of that whole concept that evolved. And so basically throughout Silent Invasion, without too much of a spoiler, they discovered what was going on and found a way to combat them effectively. So then, the aliens were going to come back because they really needed to meet their objective. So Earth basically decided we're going to fight them. And because we damaged some of their ships, we got some technology. So a lot of the stuff that I get into is all stuff that's actually technically feasible, except for fusion reactors. It's technically feasible within the next 10 years. It's actually technically feasible for us to start building right now. So there's basically the fundamental building block is an orbital ring. And the idea is that you can put something in orbit around the planet at various heights, and you can essentially run electricity through it. And the motion of that would essentially keep it in orbit around the Earth. And then you can basically mount stations on it. And then you could do that at a fairly low orbit so that you can connect a tether from the ground and be able to run what I call a nanorail, which is essentially a Kevlar or a carbon fiber line that's attached to a little, caboose that basically takes you up to space. So you get over that first mile problem, well, actually the first 100-mile problem, get into space, and then from there you can transfer in lower orbit between stations, right? So that allows us to start moving people and expensive things very quickly. And then the other idea is that you can basically set up a tunnel or a tube that's vacuum, kind of like Hyperloop, and essentially accelerate something very fast, fairly cheaply on a magnetic rail, and then have it basically blast out of that tube and be relatively high. So you want to start low, like in a valley, and go up a mountain and then basically blast off into space. And it's a relatively cheap way to move, again, material and cargo up to that could withstand about 4 Gs. And then there's just going to be rockets that take big, heavy, bulky stuff that you have to move. Like if you're moving a reactor, you got to have the foundation for the reactor. So anyway, it goes into all of that mechanics about how that happens, all as part of evolving the story. And then this huge battle that happens in space and, all the mayhem that occurs.
So do you read about all these and, because there's a lot of, even in the book I was reading and both of the books that you go into some pretty good details about technology. So do you read up and,
Yeah, I definitely research.
So how do you collect all the material?
Well, first off, I research technologies that are actually feasible for that time frame. And then collecting the material is just, you go online, there's just a plethora of information out there. And I try to find the people who are more reputable and kind of analyze what they're saying and then say, okay, well, how would that actually evolve? And then how would people interact with it? And how could that play into your story,
Yeah.
So it's fun.
Nice. Yeah, I know. I can definitely see that in your writing that, you're having more fun than I think. You had fun writing code or writing, PowerPoints and the
right. That's true. More fun than a PowerPoint and spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly.
Some questions about shifting away from the technology side of things for a minute and looking at the humanity side of things. And you have these aliens that are controlling things, but there's really a lot to do with humans as a starting point. I would love to hear more about like the role of humanity and how you see your vision of extraterrestrial life and how that overlaps or contradicts or what that interaction is like.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And it's kind of that whole human nature thing is what got that whole original idea back in like 1999. But we all know that no human's perfect. Not even me. So if we take a look in any group, we all have our flaws and stuff, but when you essentially work as a team in a group, you can take the best of everyone and you can, work around your problems, right? And one of the things I did at Intel for 25 years was basically build high-performing teams. And I really spent a lot of time sitting and analyzing people's skills and putting the right people together, to make things happen. I think there's a bit of that for humanity overall. And when we first meet any type of alien race, we could either cause the biggest catastrophe in the history of our species, or it could be one of the greatest breakthroughs. And it all comes down to really first starting by saying, okay, these are not people, they're not human. So we have to actually learn what are their values, what's important to them, why are they here talking to us, If they're coming to us, they must be superior to us to be able to travel here, at least technically. But that doesn't mean they are emotionally, or doesn't mean they even have emotions, right? It doesn't mean they speak English. There was actually this one book where the people were using radio to communicate to aliens, and it turned out that the radio frequencies actually damaged the aliens, and they thought they were being attacked.
Unintended consequences.
Right. So you have to kind of, just be mindful. My books do talk about a lesson for humans. And so one of them is that it is so easy to manipulate a group of people to do, something wrong. So if you look at what really got me thinking about all this was in the whole situation in Rwanda, the Hutu and the Tutsi, these two tribes lived together in harmony for 450 years or something. And then, it degenerated in less than 10 years into a huge genocide. So how could that happen? And there's really kind of a pattern in human behavior that people can exploit to cause those types of things to happen. So I think it's important for us as a species to think about our holistic well-being and stop focusing on our differences and start focusing on the things that we're similar. And nothing's going to do that more than when you run into an alien, because the aliens are going to be so different. That guy that I used to, I'm a Republican or you're a Democrat, we don't get along. Well, you know what? We're a lot more alike than we are to that guy.
Yeah, that's true.
And by the way, our future depends on us working together. Right. So I really tried to have that kind of aspect come out in my books. And, I actually did a dedication. I've actually got it right here so I can say it correctly. For Silent Invasion, this book is dedicated to the estimated 800,000 people who died in the Rwandan genocide. May it never happen again. And I really do mean that. May it never happen again. We never let somebody manipulate us in that way. But you can see aspects of that going on right now, like in South Africa. It's sad to keep seeing us make the same mistakes. So in that book, I tried to look at, well, what is something that would unite humanity? Well, a common enemy or a common goal are really the biggest ways to unite people. It's our tribal nature, right? And so that's what kind of plays out in the Zalthuras series. But I really do a lot of exploring, the depths of human nature, and kind of us, especially in Colonizing Trappist, try to understand who this alien species is, how they communicate, how they think, what's important to them. Because you can't make assumptions that, they said this, there's really an underlying meaning there for what they said. Well, you don't know that because you don't know the way they think.
Right. I love actually the way you layer that. When we think about the way that we see the other,
right,
just culturally, right? So we may see our culture, some other culture as other, but there are like layers of that, and you use both. You use that in all the different ways, such that we have within the human species, we have us looking at each other as other. Oh, well, we can kill them because whatever reason.
Yeah,
right?
They're not like me.
I don't like them. So,
yeah.
We can kill them. But then when we go to the common enemy, now we can pull together as humanity against the common enemy. But then there's that layer of, oh, wait a minute. They're the other at the moment, but let's find out who they are. So it's like this expanding experience of getting to know the other and learning how to not just turn everyone into an enemy just because they're
Yeah, exactly. And it's also to look for similarities more so than differences, because our nature, our tribal, history, like way deep in our brain, we look at a tribe as the group that protects us. So we're looking for those people like us to hang out with. You can see that on social media a lot today, right?
Yeah.
You try to go to the groups where people are more like me, versus I'm going to go look at the similarities for somebody who's different than me to try to build a common ground and a bridge, right?
Yeah.
Let's listen to a bit of the audiobook. They went to work immediately documenting the company's structures, transactions, and conclusions. After a few hours, Amber pulled Jeff to a quiet corner of the room and said, "I found something you are not going to believe." "What?" "The companies I'm tracking were created after World War II in the late 1940s. "Wow. Do you think the people in control of these businesses have been working for the aliens since then?" "Jeff, these companies were formed by people who ran major arms companies in Germany and Japan." "What do you mean?" "Executives from those companies formed these companies." "Are you implying that the aliens were involved with Germany and Japan during World War II?" "I'm definitely saying they were influential people at that time. What if the aliens were trying to take over the world through military force by using Germany and Japan? When that failed, they reset their plans and helped humans develop the technology to